something remarkable might be taking place at the Indiana Pacers facility behind closed doors. The recent private meeting of three well-known basketball players, Caitlyn Clark, Sophie Cunningham, and Larry Bird, has sparked intense interest in the sports community. This meeting is being held in extreme secrecy. Strict secrecy agreements were implemented, and only a small number of officials were permitted to attend. However, what would bring these three disparate basketball figures together? What type of announcement would call for Larry Bird, who no longer frequently appears in public, to be present? And what may bring together basketball greats from various eras and backgrounds, both men's and women's? We must examine each of these individuals separately and what they stand for in the sport today in order to see why this gathering is so important. Caitlyn Clark is not your typical novice. Ever since she joined the Indiana Fever of the WNBA in 2024, she has truly altered the game. She broke records, scored from almost anywhere on the court, and greatly increased awareness of women's basketball across the country during her time as a student at the University of Iowa. In the 2024 WNBA draft, when she was selected as the first overall pick, she was already regarded as one of the most promising young players in the history of women's basketball. Caitlyn exceeded expectations in her debut season. She scored 16.7 points, dished out 7.1 assists, and pulled down 5.9 rebounds on average. Good stats by any standard, but particularly noteworthy for a guy who is just starting out. She led the Indiana Fever to their first postseason appearance in a number of years and helped them regain their competitiveness. Her competitions became must-see occasions. More than 1 million people watched NBA broadcasts with Clark on a regular basis. Some even reached 2 million, which was a significant increase for the league. Clark's influence extended beyond the court. Sales of tickets surged. Products are sold out. Just by being there, games sold out ahead of time both at home and away, which was uncommon in previous WNBA seasons. Additionally, Clark's marketability has attracted new partners and sponsors, assisting the league's expansion both monetarily and in terms of public visibility. She has amassed millions of followers on social media, building a brand that appeals to much more people than simply basketball aficionados. In summary, Caitlyn Clark has emerged as a representation of what women's basketball can do with the correct encouragement and attention. Let's now examine Sophie Cunningham. Cunningham is one of the most respected and resilient players in the WNBA, despite not being as well known as Clark. Since 2019, I've been playing with the Phoenix Mercury. She has established a reputation as a fierce rival. She is renowned for her ability to guard several positions, her physical style of play, and her potent three-point shooting. She averages about 10 points and 4 rebounds every game, which is a respectable stat line. However, her influence extends much beyond the box office results. Cunningham has been an outspoken supporter of the WNBA's players' rights, equitable pay, and improved working conditions. She frequently talks in public on the need for funding for women's sports and is involved in the Players' Union. She speaks for an increasing number of WNBA players who are leaders advocating for substantive reform in the league in addition to being accomplished athletes. Cunningham is an important player in any conversation on the direction of women's basketball because of her background, resilience, and leadership. Then there is Larry Bird, a well-known figure in basketball that is not just in Indiana but worldwide. Bird, who was born in French Lick, Indiana, rose to fame at Indiana State University before joining the Boston Celtics as an NBA superstar. He is regarded as one of the greatest basketball brains of all time, having won 3 NBA titles and 3 consecutive MVP honors from 1984 to 1986. Bird continued to influence the game as a coach and then as an executive with the Indiana Pacers after he retired from playing. In 2000, the Pacers advanced to the NBA Finals under his direction, and in 2012, he was voted NBA Executive of the Year. In Indiana, Bird has a strong, enduring bond with basketball. He has consistently stood for diligence, basketball acumen, and the value of teamwork. Despite his recent retreat from the spotlight, the sport still greatly respects his presence and opinions. Therefore, Larry Bird's appearance at a closed-door meeting or event isn't for a friendly conversation. It indicates that a serious matter is being discussed. What may the purpose of this gathering be? A lot of sports analysts think it has to do with bridging the gap between women's and men's basketball. Cross-gender mentoring, in which male basketball greats like Bird coach and collaborate with up-and-coming WNBA players, is gaining popularity. These mentorships may include strategy sharing, skill development, and even off-court advice in areas including as leadership, branding, and business. For instance, guys like Clark and Cunningham could gain a lot from Bird's knowledge of basketball principles and team tactics. However, today's WNBA players provide contemporary experiences with social media, fan interaction, and striking a balance between advocacy, branding, and professional athletics. Sharing information between genders and generations has benefits for both parties. This goes beyond personal careers. The goal is to completely alter the system. The level of unrealized potential in women's sports has already been demonstrated by Caitlyn Clark's popularity. Women's basketball may continue to gain traction and impact with increased funding, mentoring, and cooperation. Including well-known male speakers like Larry Bird gives that development greater legitimacy and backing from the larger sports community. The growth of basketball in the children and community is another important area that this summit may have an influence on. Basketball is quite popular in Indiana, both in high school and at the collegiate and professional levels. New training programs for young players might be developed by Clark, Cunningham, and Bird working together. This would assist the next generation gain opportunity, confidence, and good talents. These initiatives might consist of leadership seminars, basketball camps, or mentorships at schools that combine contemporary and traditional methods of playing the sport. Partnerships for business are another opportunity. Caitlyn Clark has a huge commercial following. When you combine Larry Bird's financial acumen and heritage, you have a potent combination that may draw big sponsors and media partnerships. These agreements may finance youth initiatives, the WNBA, or even brand new league projects. Sophie Cunningham's voice and activism would guarantee that these initiatives remain based on player inclusion and fairness. The WNBA has already begun looking at expansion as a result of growing demand. Strong leadership from both current players and seasoned basketball brains will be needed to expand the number of teams or enhance the resources available for existing ones. Involving individuals like Bird and Cunningham might introduce the sort of expertise and experience that supports the league's proper development and lays a solid basis for its long-term success. Another area where cooperation might be beneficial is in technology. Thanks to advancements like social media, performance monitoring applications, and virtual reality, basketball training and fan interaction are rapidly evolving. These resources might be used by a collaborative effort to produce new player training programs or fan material. Consider a training software that teaches young athletes both Clark's contemporary techniques and the ancient principles of Bird's. Or a documentary series with NBA and WNBA legends on the evolution of the sport. This potential partnership is interesting because it mirrors a broader trend in athletics that is dismantling barriers across genders, leagues, and generations. The expansion of women's basketball is not the only objective. The goal is to advance basketball overall. These leaders are demonstrating that the sport's future can be more inventive, inclusive, and connected than ever before by pooling their expertise, collaborating, and combining their influence. Caitlyn Clark's global impact is a significant aspect of her biography that is occasionally disregarded. Although her influence in the US has dominated the news, basketball fans worldwide have been keenly monitoring Clark's ascent. Fans are watching WNBA games in Canada, Europe, and even certain areas of Asia just to see her play. In nations where women's basketball hasn't traditionally been a popular sport, brief videos of her jaw-dropping shots and spectacular passes have gone viral thanks to the growth of social media platforms like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube Shorts. The WNBA is receiving more attention as a result of this expanding global interest. Caitlyn Clark's fame might be the decisive factor for a league that has long failed to attract widespread international attention. And if she, Sophie Cunningham, and Larry Bird collaborate on a project that involves worldwide touring or international outreach, it may contribute to women's basketball's unprecedented growth. It's also important to note that women's basketball is finally beginning to gain traction as the media environment changes. WNBA games, particularly those starring Clark and other well-known players like A.A. Wilson, Sabrina Ionescu, and Brianna Stewart, are now receiving greater broadcast on ESPN, ABC, Amazon Prime, and even smaller streaming services. A few of Clark's games in the 2024 season had attendance that was on par with, or even higher than NBA regular season games. This isn't only a temporary increase. When the product is effectively promoted and accessible, it shows that people are truly interested. Clark's participation helped make the WNBA All-Star Game in July 2024 one of the most viewed All-Star events in league history. Someone like Larry Bird becomes even more significant in this situation. With decades of expertise in marketing campaigns, TV networks, and sports business strategy, Bird could provide athletes like Clark and Cunningham with priceless guidance on adjusting to this new level of celebrity. He did it in the 1980s, when the NBA was still figuring itself out, so he knows what it takes to be the face of a league. The NBA was having trouble at the time due to low viewership and a negative public perception. However, superstars like Bird and Magic Johnson contributed to its recovery by infusing the game with personality, competition, and excitement. Bird's capacity to manage stress, guide a group, and uphold a professional demeanor while advancing the league is comparable to what Caitlyn Clark is currently dealing with. The historical struggle for gender equality in basketball must also be acknowledged. Compared to their male counterparts, female athletes have endured decades of less media attention, poorer pay, fewer sponsorship agreements, and fewer facilities. Even now, NBA players use private planes, while WNBA players frequently take commercial aircraft. These variations may have an impact on general morale, health, and performance. Regarding these matters, Sophie Cunningham has been very outspoken. She frequently advocates for equitable treatment and funding for women's basketball using her position. She has personal experience with the difficulties faced by female athletes, such as playing in underfunded venues and receiving lower compensation than their male counterparts. Her initiative in this field gives this trio's possible collaboration yet another significant dimension. With Cunningham representing the players, Clark providing media attention, and Bird contributing business and historical knowledge, there is an opportunity to not only draw attention to these problems but also find solutions.